December 6, 2011 meeting of the Contractor State License Board.
Come to order. I'm Bob Lamb, the board chair. Joan, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is Tara here? There she is. Hi, Tara. Will you please call the roll?
Bob Brown.
Here.
Dave Diaz.
Here.
Joan Hancock.
here.
Matt Kelly.
Present.
Louise Kirkbride.
Here.
Bob Lamb.
Here.
Ed Lang.
Here.
Jim Miller.
Here.
Lisa Miller-Strunk.
She has an excused absence, so does Pastor Herrera.
John O'Rourke.
Here.
Bruce Rust.
Here.
Paul Shafino.
Here.
Frank Shetter.
Here.
Mark Thurman.
Here.
Thank you, Tara. Now will the members of the board, senior staff, and members of the audience please introduce themselves. And I also would like to advise the members of the public identification is purely voluntary. Don, would you please start?
Don Chang, Legal Affairs, Legal Counsel from Consumer Affairs.
Laura Zuniga, CSLB, Chief of Legislation.
Mark Thurman, board member.
Bob Brown, board member.
Dave Diaz, board member.
Karen Ollinger, Chief of Licensing.
John O'Rourke, board member.
Cindy Christensen, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Paul Shafino, board member.
Bob Lamb, board member.
Steve Sands, registrar.
Joan Hancock, board member.
Rick Lopes, Chief of Public Affairs.
Louise Kirkbride, board member.
Ed Lang, board member.
Dave Fogg, Chief of Enforcement.
Matt Kelly, board member.
Greg Shutter, board member.
Bruce Rust, board member.
Jim Miller, board member. Mike Franklin, Deputy Attorney General.
Sir.
Joe Upchurch, District Council 16.
Behind.
Alex Gottfried, District Council 16. Richard Marks, Western Electrical Contractors Association, and Cooling Contractors of California. Larry Rolfus, California Landscape Contractors Association.
Clifford Berg, Painting and Decorating Contractors Association.
Scott Weber, CSLB Enforcement Manager.
Melanie Gardwell, CSLB Public Affairs.
Rick Pierce, Basic Crafts. Ken Grossbart, Abdulaziz Grossbart, Weapon.
Doug Galbraith, Enforcement.
Amy Cox-Farrell, CSLB MP.
Ed Rieger, North Hilbert News. Nancy Paul, Capital Services.
Nancy Eisler, the Enforcement Program Manager with the Board for Professional Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geologists.
Venus Stromberg, Public Affairs, CSLB.
Jonathan Buttle, CSLB Executive Division.
Karen Maggi, CSLB Licensing. Ivy Lichtenfeld, CSLB Testing Division.
Oh, one more. Introduce yourself, sir. Welcome, Phil Vermeulen. Have a seat and join us here. Now's the time for my comments, and I would just like to wish everyone here, board members and the members of the public, a happy holidays and happy new year. I think that we have some challenges ahead of us here at CSLB, but our board registrar and the board members here are well up to the task of meeting them head on, and I think we'll have a good year in the coming 12 months. Are there any other comments from any of the board members at this time? Hearing none, we'll go to public comment. And I have to read this. This item is provided for public comment pertaining to items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. However, the board cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. The CSLB welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the CSLB's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. But if for some reason we forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item, a member of the public desiring to comment on the item should raise their hand and they will be recognized. Also, we will be limiting public comment to 5 minutes per individual. Are there any individuals that would like to address the board at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to review and approval of the minutes of September 16th, 2011 board meeting minutes. Do any board members have any comments regarding the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I would move we approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned, seconded to approve the minutes as mailed. Are there any comments? Hearing none, go to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Move on to the Legislative Committee report. Board Member Mark Thurman will provide this report. Mark?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet is a report from our November 3rd Legislative Committee meeting wherein we discussed a number of pieces of proposed legislation as well as a brief recap of the business of 2011. And in the report, you'll find that we have a number of proposals that we would like to bring to the board in the form of a motion. But before we do, what I would like to do is go back and just have our Chief of Legislative Affairs, Laura Zuniga, take up a couple of the items and just clarify that for the full board so that everybody is familiar with what our proposals include at this point.
Run through each one. Okay. I'll just briefly go through the proposals we have and let me know if you have any questions as we go forward. First one is an amendment to Business and Professions Code Section 7011.4. This would provide all of our enforcement representatives the authority to issue a notice to appear citation. Currently, the way the statute is written, only the enforcement representatives in the SWIFT unit have this authority. We do have a slight modification to the language just to rework it to make it a little bit more clear. Any questions on this proposal? Okay. The second proposal would amend B&P Code Section 7011.8. Under existing law, if someone files a false complaint with the board, they're guilty of an infraction. The board doesn't have the authority to issue an infraction itself, so a violation of this section has never been pursued. So in this proposal, we suggest changing it to give the registrar authority to take administrative action if a false complaint is filed. Any questions? The third proposal would amend B&P Code Section 7026.1 to address the issue of unlicensed construction consultants. This proposal would require an individual who provides a bid, arranges the work schedules, and maintains oversight of a project to be licensed. They would need to meet all three of those criteria to require licensure. Any comments or questions? The fourth proposal would amend B&P Code Section 7026.1 also. This would address the issue of rental equipment providers. This proposal, if the board chooses, we'd like to approve in concept to allow us to continue to work on the details of this. But this would require vendors of operated equipment that exercise direction and control of work would provide that they would be covered by this chapter and require licensure.
I would like to comment on this one in particular for the board. We did discuss this a little bit at the committee meeting, and there is some concern, I guess, on the part of Caltrans in particular, wherein there are general contractors who are not listing for a particular trade or craft that would otherwise be a subcontracted portion of work, and then turning around and hiring someone who's ostensibly renting equipment and people to the project, and thus circumnavigating the listing law. So we've made a couple of changes to this, and the staff has also talked about continuing to work through this with Caltrans in crafting the language so that it does what Caltrans is looking to do and doesn't unnecessarily put the burden on our board to enforce those things.
Any other questions or comments? The next one amends B&P Code Section 7076. This would correct, I think, a technical change in the law, a typo from when the statute was put in place. It just changes the term death to disassociation so that the statute will read more clearly. Any questions? Okay. The last proposal amends B&P Code Section 7106.5, and this would provide It will provide the board the authority to pursue an accusation when a license has been revoked by operation of law. And this would allow us, when a license does become revoked by operation of law, to get the facts on record by filing the accusation and when and if the licensee seeks reinstatement at a later date. Any comments or questions? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the Legislative Committee would like to propose that the board adopt these proposals and direct the staff to proceed with these as discussed.
Okay, is there a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would move the proposed legislation that was discussed and authorize the board to move forward with it.
Is there a second?
Yeah, second motion.
The motion and a second on the floor. Are there any comments or questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say aye. Motion carries.
The final piece of business is there is in your packet a report on the status of the 2011 legislation. There are a couple of bills that carry over that obviously we will be continuing to monitor and report on as the 2012 legislative year comes on.
Okay, very good. We're also going to need a motion to approve the November 3rd Legislative Committee Summary Report. Can I get that motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to review and consideration of legislative proposals for the upcoming legislative session. Is that the first thing we did?
No, we did that, yeah.
We already did that, so I went out a little out of order again. It's something that I like to do because I'm the chairman. Okay, and number 3, the status of the, you already did that too. Boy, you are quick. I'm telling you, I got to move quicker here. Okay, we'll move to the licensing committee report. Dave Diaz and Karen Ollinger will provide this report. Dave and Karen?
The licensing committee has not met since last board meeting in September. I will now ask Carolyn Ollinger to provide the licensing program update.
Thank you. I'll try to be as quick. You have in your packet the licensing program update. Pages 1 and 2 detail the license application workload, and as you can see, and as we've been reporting for some time now, application workload is down. It continues to decrease. I think that's just indicative of the economy right now. If there are no questions on the application workload, I'll move on to the limited liability companies legislation. As all of you know, the passage of Senate Bill 392 in 2010 authorizes the board now to issue licenses to limited liability companies. This legislation, which took effect last January, we have been working very hard to get implemented. We had a 1-year delayed implementation phase, and the clock is running. We need to have this implemented by this January 2012. I am happy to report that we are on schedule to implement this legislation. Just a few updates on this. Last Thursday, we had all of our licensing staff who will be handling the limited liability company applications go through training with the Secretary of State's office on the new database screens to access limited liability companies. So they now have access to these screens and know how to use it. Today, we anticipate that the LLC bond and related information is going to be mailed out to all of the surety companies that have bonds on file with CSLB. This is the new $100,000 bond that the LLCs will have to come up with. Thanks to Don Chang, thank you, Don. Our 2 applications to start issuing these licenses have been approved. Our original exam application and our waiver application. We anticipate that we will put these forms online on our website following Christmas, meaning December 27th. So we will have them out there for people to start applying before the first of the year. Our other applications, we're still working out a few of the bugs on those, but those will be something that will come down the road. We have continued to work with our IT division. Amy's staff has been extraordinary in getting our needs met, and we expect that all of our automated processes will be in place by the time that we start accepting the applications and issuing the LLC licenses. So we're on schedule. We're going to meet the January deadline. Pages 3 and 4 have the fee increases. We've just included that again, although we have been reporting on this for some time, but since this just took effect in July, we wanted to make sure that everyone was well aware of what the fee increases were. Page 5 is our dispositions of application by fiscal year. It just shows where all of the applications that we received, where they're at in the process, whether they've been issued, voided, or are continuing to pend in our system for some reason. Our licensing transaction processing times, there is a brief paragraph on that, but if you refer back to pages 14 through 16, you can see the actual number of weeks it's taking us to pull and process either an application or a document related to licensing. Fingerprint, the statistics are on page 7. You'll notice also a decrease in the number of fingerprint requests and hits that we're getting, and that is just as a process of the decrease in the applications that we've been receiving. Our licensing information center, I know we've reported a lot on this in the last, especially the last year, and the wait times going up and kind of the difficulties that this unit has been experiencing. As you know, we've had a number of vacancies in this unit, and we've been working very hard to get exemptions from the freeze and whatnot. And now that the freeze has been lifted, the good news I have to report is we have made a number of selections for our licensing information center. We have submitted those applications to the Department of Consumer Affairs, and hopefully very soon here we will have some new employees on board to handle the workload from that center. The statistics, as far as what we've been able to do with the minimal staff that we've had, is on page 9 of your report. Pages 10, 11, 12, 13, and 13 detail our judgment unit. This is, of course, the unit that processes any outstanding liability, judgment, and bond payment acclaimed. You'll see the graphs in here as to the number of notices that we've received, the number of suspensions that we have implemented, and the number of reinstatements, and the total number of funds that we've been able to assist in collecting based on those liabilities, judgments, and payment of claims. With, at the bottom of page 13, the total savings to the public on what we've been able to help collect. And that basically wraps it up for the licensing program update.
Testing program update. Chief of Testing Heidi Mincer-Hill will now give the testing program update.
Morning. The testing division is our biggest challenge right now is staffing. We have 4 vacant positions. We actually have a 5th one as of a couple days ago in our testing centers. So we are working on interviewing office technicians, office assistants to serve as test monitors in our test centers. We are managing our workload with the use of part-time proctors to fill in for those vacant positions. So everything is business as usual. However, we're really anxious to hire permanent staff. We're also waiting for approval to hire a management position in our test administration center. That approval needs to come from DCA and also DPA. So that's going to take several months. So I have 2 analysts who are working to do that position, which is a great relief to me because I'm the only manager left. So waiting for those positions to be filled. And as far as wait time, as Karen said, when applications are down, then testing is down also. So we don't have any wait times in our test center. We're able to accommodate people who walk in at almost every test center. And the only issues we have is when our proctors are tied up with other department exams and can't work, and then we have to close our test center. As far as examination development goes, we are progressing. I have full staff for examination development. So we have completed a new exam for the C32, parking and highway improvement, also C16, fire protection has just been completed. And we're working on occupational analysis for C4 boilers, C21 building, moving, and demolition, C42 sanitation systems, C46 solar, C47 manufactured housing, C57 well drilling, and hazardous certification. So all those are in progress. New exams we're working on, C2 insulation, C7 low voltage, C9 drywall, C12 earthwork and paving, C16 fire, oh, that one's done. That's a mistake there. C31 construction zone traffic control, and C53 swimming pool, and C54 tile. We're also, with regard to occupational analysis that I'm going to talk to you about in more detail in my presentation, we are, when we mail out surveys, we're using a model where we use mailed out surveys and also emailed surveys so that we're saving time and money by emailing any contractors that we need to reach who we have email addresses for. We're emailing them the survey. If we don't have an email address for them, then we're mailing it out, so we're getting coverage on all areas, and that's working out very well. And one more thing we're working on, the enforcement representative, the ER1 exam, which is a civil service civil service classification that's specific to CSLB. We are, as we speak, giving this exam across the hall. We gave it this morning in 5 test centers, and Sacramento has 3 sessions actually scheduled. So we had 160 applicants scheduled for this exam today. Probably that many didn't show up. I think we'll find out what the no-show rate is, but that's gone very well. This is the second time we've administered this exam using our SCORE software, and that was, this is a different application for our SCORE software that was designed for licensing exams. We're now using it for a civil service exam, and our exam development staff, IT, and our HR staff all work together with the department to get delegation basically to handle this exam, to develop it and administer it in our own test centers. So that's been going very well. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Heidi. Award of CMEA grants. Each year, provided funding is available, the board awards grants to eligible programs pursuant to the Construction Management Education Management Sponsorship Act of 1991. In your packet, you will find the registrar's notice of intent to award the grants as recommended by the Construction Management Education Advisory Committee. Unless there are any questions, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the awarding grants as outlined in the memo dated November 8, 2011.
Make a motion.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries.
This concludes the licensing committee report. Thank you.
I have a question.
You have a question? Go ahead. Yes.
For Karen. So it's a very dramatic drop-off, clearly, in the number of applications for new licenses. Are you seeing either a similar or a substantial drop-off in the number of people who are renewing their licenses?
No, as a matter of fact, I was just talking to Mr. Shafino about this. We're not seeing a dramatic decrease in the number of people that are renewing their licenses.
Interesting.
I guess they want to keep them.
So they're hanging on.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume with such a dramatic drop-off that sooner or later the pool is going to get smaller just through people normally retiring.
Through attrition, yes, you would think so. Now, our pool is much smaller at the moment, and I actually haven't had a chance to talk to Jonathan just yet. We saw a drop-off when our fee increases hit, only because we were returning applications for the wrong fee.
Yeah.
Because most of our areas are staying flat, but
Yeah.
we saw a pretty significant drop-off, and I haven't yet checked with cashiering to see if that's the case there. We're not seeing a significant attrition rate in our total number of licensees in the population. But again, for $360 for 2 years, or, you know, less than that for 4 years to go inactive, I think most people are just keeping their license renewed.
Any other questions?
Just one.
Go ahead, Bob.
On the grants, is this an increase from years past as far as interest, or is this consistent with what is dictated by?
You mean the amount that we're awarding?
Yeah, just the number of applicants more so.
No, actually, it's remained pretty consistent over the years, the number of applicants, and the amount stays consistent at $150,000. What we do is, we have a certain amount we're going to award. We look at each school and how many students they have in that program, and then we just basically do simple division to see how much will be awarded to each school.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item G, Public Affairs Committee report. Joan Hancock, you gonna present this report? No. I've been notified we're going off script here, and that's something I like to do. I'm not afraid.
As well, you have the right to do that, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Public Affairs Committee, I am happy to report that this report will be very brief. However, it does not discount the hard work of the Public Affairs Office and its staff. We would like to report that the office coordinated their 3rd annual Employee Wellness Fair on November 2nd here at headquarters, and there were approximately 24 exhibitors and 180 employees. The committee is also happy to report that staff has continued in their diligence to popularize our Senior Scam Stopper seminars. And on page 5 in your packet, you will find the Senior Scam Stopper highlights. That's a mouthful. I call it the triple S, highlights. This fall, staff put together and distributed to all state legislators information packets promoting the seminars. And staff has already received response and requests from these legislators, many of whom want to participate, and we are reviewing these requests for scheduling of future scam stoppers. There's a list of recent and proposed seminars on page 6 of your packet. Also, at this time, we'd like to commend Melanie Bedwell, if you're here. No, there she is. Raise your hand or stand up, Melanie. We really want to acknowledge you for all the hard work that you are doing right now on the 2012 law book. It's over 800 pages, and we want to thank you for your dedication. Thank you. Now, Chief of Public Affairs Rick Lopes will expand on the program update.
Thank you. We'll start on page 1. I will just note some of the highlights. The first thing is, I had mentioned at the last board meeting, but we are moving ahead with staff, is working with our IT staff, and we've begun actually doing input of materials onto our website. In the past, when we had requests, those would go to the web team. They would actually do the coding and everything that was necessary in order to get it onto the website. They've been really great about training a couple of our staff members. And so we are now doing a lot of our own input into the website. They okay it and make sure it's on and it's done correctly. But I think that's worked out really well for both of us on IT, as they've been dealing with their own staffing issues, and it's allowed us to get things up on our website on a timely basis. At the bottom of page 1, you see just an update on our social media efforts, and the number of people who like us and really like us is slowly climbing. Thank you. On page 2, you see the updates on our email alerts feature, and those do continue to grow. You see I noted on the line there where our numbers were at the last board meeting, and they're steadily growing. These are the people that do receive anything from information about our newsletters to our press releases, our industry bulletins, and notices for meetings like this one. And I'd encourage anybody in the industry who doesn't currently receive them to go to the website and sign up so you can get those email alerts and get timely information from us. On page 3, I wanted to note that we still are working with a production company based in Southern California on the possibility of a reality TV show. We are kind of taking a slow moving ahead on that as we try to identify staff. We'll just see over the next couple of months. We should know a lot more on if this is actually, excuse the pun, but actually going to become a reality. We're working and trying to overcome some of the bumps along the way. I also did want to note that in our press releases there at the bottom of page 3, since the last board meeting, we did have our fall blitz, which we did have to curtail some of our media efforts, but we did do a press release in some media as we issued 113 NTAs over a 2-day period. So we wanted to bring that to your attention as well. On page 4 in our disaster relief, you can see some information there. Our staff at our SWIFT office in Bakersfield assisted in a local assistance center for a wildfire in the Tehachapi area. And Registrar Steve Sands and I also did some work with NASCLA, the National Association of State Contractor License Agencies, to help utilize some of our materials that we use in the wake of disasters to help put together some templates for other states. And I know that our friends on the Nevada board have replicated the signs that we use, the disaster signs and some of the other things, and they actually utilized those in the Reno area. They had a fire there a couple of weeks ago, and they were able to do some extensive outreach in that area, kind of following the templates that we had set up. Our California Licensed Contractor newsletter is currently in production, and we expect that to hopefully be out in the next month or so. And this issue is, again, going to be an online only. On page 5, the publication highlights, as Joe noted earlier, actually, Melanie is well underway working on the law book. There's a lot of changes to everything that reflects the LLC, to the blanket bonds and payments. There's lots of things that happen in the law that need a lot of changes in our law book. So we are moving ahead as quickly as we can. We expect that to be out in January, if not by early to mid-February, depending on how things work with our printer. And as Joan also mentioned, the senior scam stoppers, and actually since the booklet was put together, our number of planned seminars in January and February, we now have 9 of them that are scheduled. This outreach that we did to the legislators has been really well received, and we've gotten, like I said, a number of we will keep updating our website. If you look on our homepage, there is a senior scam stopper graphic. If you click on that, it has a calendar. We'd encourage board members to participate and to be involved in that wherever you can, or to at least attend, and we'll be happy to help you to coordinate that with your schedules. And then you see on the partial calendar on page 6, and then on page 7, as Joan also did note, the employee wellness. We did have our 3rd annual wellness fair that was here last month. It was very successful, very well received, and with the research that we've done, it's probably one of the most popular things that we do every year. And so there you also see some of the other employee wellness things that we've got going on here, as well as at our Norwalk office in Southern California. And finally, I won't go through them, but you see at the end there is just a sample of some of the media clips that we've been involved with over the last couple of months. And that concludes our program update.
Quick question. On the scam stoppers, I noticed Senator Steinberg has 2 within 2 weeks scheduled. Is that due to high demand in the Sacramento area, or just?
Well, it's due to the fact that it had been a while since we've done one in the Sacramento area. Their office was interested in doing a couple of them, and since logistically, with the travel exemptions, it's very good for us to do it here. And we're also going to be looking at trying to do a couple live web streams since it is local. We'll be able to utilize the department's resources to do that.
Terrific.
Are there any other questions? Hearing no other questions, we'll move on to agenda item H, Enforcement Committee report. Matt Kelly and David Fote will provide this report. Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our committee has not met since we last reported out, and at this time I'll summarize a meeting that was held in at our last meeting in Norwalk. That meeting was attended, it was on September 16th, it was attended by you, Mr. Chairman, Paul Schifino, Ed Lang, Pastor Herrera, and myself, and Mr. Thurman, Mark Thurman was there. Anyhow, that meeting was chaired by Mark Thurman, and we met with Southern California enforcement staff, and they had a lot of requests. They had a lot of requests as to things that they would like to have further training and education on. Number one was an additional training on bankruptcy law. Bankruptcy case law and impact on enforcement training session has been scheduled for February. It's going to be a one-day course. It'll be provided by Deputy Attorney General Moretta Ward. She is a well-known expert in bankruptcy law, and she is scheduled to be in the audience today.
She canceled, I'm sorry.
Okay.
For Mike Franklin.
And then the training will include an overview of bankruptcy case law and the impact on bankruptcy filing has had on CSLB enforcement actions and the consumer's ability to recover financial restitution. There is also a request for additional training on workers' compensation violations. Many of the items that they were concerned about is workers' compensation requirements and enforcement strategies training session that's been scheduled for February. This will be a one-day course that will be provided by the state San Diego Attorney General Greenbaum and representatives from the State Compensation Insurance Fund. Was I right with SDAG?
Pretty close, yes. Supervising Deputy Attorney General in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Again, this will be also representatives from State Comp Insurance Fund and the Department of Insurance. The training will include an overview of workers' compensation insurance requirements, investigation strategies, and elements needed to support prosecution of uninsured and underinsured contractors. The third item was they were seeking a better understanding of CSLB's authority to regulate the construction industry, and this is an agenda item for the upcoming Attorney General Summit that will be held on December 16th, 2011. This will be addressed in a weekly report after the summit. And they indicated a needed update, an updated procedures manual, and staff has been working diligently on updating the procedures manual, which will now be provided in an electronic format, which will allow for streaming of any updates and consistency through the state. Currently, there are several sections already available on CSLB's intranet, and it is anticipated that the manual will be completed in its entirety by the end of 2012. And then swift safety procedures. I think everybody's aware of an incident that took place, how long has it been?
It's during the Blitz.
It was during the Blitz.
Rick, what was that?
Yeah.
Probably about a month ago.
October 7th.
And it created a need for the enforcement division to carefully examine the security and safety of our staff, and they've been looking closely at swift sting procedures. Enforcement management has held several meetings with SWIFT staff statewide. Staff were able to voice concerns and bring suggested solutions to the table. Some of the suggestions were reviewed by DCA's Division of Investigations Chief Darrell Walker and have been approved for implementation. And then we have a letter of support that we're going to ask interested industry parties to help us with. Historically, the CSLB has had an excellent working relationship with Los Angeles Supervising Deputy City Attorney Don Cass and his staff. They have been an invaluable partner to the CSLB in our efforts to protect consumers from unlicensed operators, agreeing to prosecute 100% of our unlicensed cases. Unfortunately, due to budget cuts and limited resources, his staff has been redirected and are no longer able to prosecute our cases. I have with me a draft letter addressed to Los Angeles City Attorney Carmen A. Trutanich, stating how imperative Don Cass and his staff has been to CSLB in the construction industry in the city of Los Angeles. And we would like to ask members of the public here today for their support in this letter. Don's commitment to prosecuting individuals who commit construction fraud and take advantage of homeowners has been crucial to CSLB, and we ask that his staff be allowed to continue to prosecute construction fraud. David's got some 30 copies of the letter available for you. Do I need to read it? It is. I don't need to. Okay. It's available, and again, if you'd like to see a copy, please speak to David Fote about it. And at this time, David will give us an update with the enforcement program.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. If we could turn to agenda item H1. On page 1, we've provided a vacancy update, and I'm pleased to report that the hiring freeze was lifted, so we're moving very quickly to interview and hire qualified employees to fill the vacancies on this page. Of specific note is our peace officer positions. We have 4 internal candidates that are going through backgrounds currently, but that leaves another 5 vacancies that we've not been able to fill internally. What we're finding, though, is the Department of Justice is laying off 206 special investigators that have already been through the academy. I think it's about a $1,300 pay decrease to come work for us as a peace officer, but yet our jobs are still good, and a job with the CSLB is better than no job at all. So the really good news is that we got a lot of applicants. That didn't come out too well.
I think you meant to say that the job for the CSLB is the best job anyone could ever hope to have.
That's right, no matter what the pay. They should be willing to work here for free. But it's certainly increasing our candidate pool for peace officer. That's a good thing.
That's good.
If we could turn to page 2, we're including the savings to the public, running a little behind last year at the intake mediation centers. It's still a real focus, though, to get to these complaints early and to resolve them and have restitution paid to injured parties. We included 2 highlights that are good examples of what we're seeing more of today, and that's unpaid material suppliers and subcontractors. You'll see the one, this trucking company, we're able to help secure over $108,000 in payment for them. I did talk to some of our intake mediation center staff this morning. I asked, what are you seeing come through the door? And it was interesting. They're seeing a lot of complaints similar to this, but also material suppliers that often don't know where the materials were delivered. So we do what we can to help them recover the monies owed. But if we don't have a job site, there isn't a whole lot we can do. Ultimately, for these type of misuse of fund cases, we have to prove capacity to pay. We have to be able to prove that somebody was paid for the materials or the labor that was performed by the unpaid subcontractor material supplier. On the bottom of the page, we have a highlight that relates to a public works job, and this is something we provided training to our staff on to make sure they understand that subcontractors have a right to be paid within 10 days of the prime receiving payment. And that's pretty easy to prove in most public works projects because you have an application for payment which clearly shows when payment was made. On page 3, we have an update on the illegal advertisement and telephone disconnect program. What I found real interesting is we've opened 1,600 complaints, and these are complaints that we receive from industry where they're giving us, whether it's Craigslist or Yellow Page ads or business cards of businesses that don't have a contractor's license. What I've learned, though, is out of those 1,600, 500 of those contractors were determined to be licensed. And that it was interesting that they're advertising without including their license number. Many of them are also advertising out of name style. So for them, they receive warning letters. For the others, we look to either schedule them for a sting, or if it's in a classified directory, we're telling all of them for that matter, that you have to turn your phone off. Until such time as you get a contractor's license, you cannot be advertising illegally and answering your telephone to take jobs. And you see the numbers here as to the success that's had. We haven't had a whole lot of people that have gone out and got a license, unfortunately. And we've turned off 48 phones. Our goal for this calendar year was 50. We have now 11 that are pending telephone termination, and so we should hit the goal of 50 by the end of December. On page 4, an update on our efforts to enforce workers' compensation insurance requirements. It's very gratifying that our consumer service representatives have taken to this well, where we have consumers that clearly indicate on the complaint form the contractor had employees, but yet there's no policy on file. And when we verify that, typically over the phone with the licensee, we're asking them, I understand these employees did this job. They say, yes, they did. Well, you have a problem here. You have an exemption on file. You have no workers' comp. And with that set of facts, what we're doing is canceling those exemptions through Karen Ollinger and her staff. It's proving very effective. They're giving 30 days to provide proof that we're wrong, but if they don't do that, the license is suspended. And you'll see that we've been able to attain 88 new policies. So it's having some impact, and it's really a very low workload for our staff. It's not taking a lot of resources, and it seems that it's having some effectiveness. On page 5, I've included the savings to the public for the investigative centers. Just to give you an idea where we are today overall with our savings to the public. And what we mean by that is when we have a complaint, somebody has gone out and they've got a bid and they can tell us what it's going to take to complete the job. We use that. We take that figure, we add that to what was paid towards that contract, total it, subtract the contract price, and if we can get that financial loss paid, that's a savings to the public, or if we can compel someone to, at the contractor's expense, to go out and fix the job. Where we're at today, though, is we're $600,000 below where we were at this time last year, and I attribute a lot of that to the recession. We're struggling a little bit with the investigative staff, the investigative center staff issuing the stop orders. But one thing that Bob Lamb brought to our attention, he gave us the summary of the meeting on the 16th of September. And and as Mr. Kelly mentioned, staff want training on workers' comp and better understanding as to how it all works. And so we are putting that training together in January. I think they'll have a little bit better comfort in issuing the stop order and also addressing those violations through the administrative process. At the bottom of the page, we included a highlight regarding an unlicensed contractor. It was a 5-year process, which is entirely too long, and that's out of the ordinary. But the reason we put this in there is he didn't show up for his bench warrant. He didn't show up for his trial date, and a bench warrant was issued. And what I thought was interesting is that he was picked up on a DUI. And that got left out of the story. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have used this one. But he got picked up, and that compelled him to show in court. And it is a problem for some of these unlicensed contractors where they have warrants out for their arrest. And without having peace officers or enough peace officers here, we can't always help the local law enforcement to the extent we will be able to when all 12 of our positions are filled. The next one deals with a situation where we started out at the city attorney's office thinking we were going to file misdemeanors, but there was a fatality. A fatality occurred because of negligent workplace safety practices by the contractor. And I mention this because there is an opportunity to do more with the Cal OSHA or the Division of Occupational Safety and Health cases where we have felonies or serious injuries that are occurring on job sites. The problem's been there's a non-admission clause in most of their settlement agreements, so we can't do a whole lot with it. But Mike Franklin and I will be meeting with DOSH, if not in December, it'll be the first part of January. They have a new chief, Ellen Whitus, and what I've explained to her is, let's just focus on your top 10 offenders, your top 10 contractors that have unsafe work environments that are causing these serious injuries or fatalities, and let's take an administrative action against them. But you can also, as you see by this highlight, you can file a case criminally if you're inclined to do so. And the next one deals with, and you probably read this, our oldest unlicensed contractor in the history of the CSLB, Jody Foster's father, 89 years old. It's kind of an interesting story in that we being Rick Lopes and I, didn't know about this investigation until we read about it in the paper. You know, it goes to show that we need to do more with our investigative center staff to make sure that we're highlighting their successes. So one thing I've learned from Steve Sands, he does his weekly report. I'm now putting out one that's somewhat similar, but I'm including some of the highlights in their names, and hopefully will encourage our staff that are doing fine work to let us know so that we can publicize it. On page 8, just a kind of a shout out to John O'Rourke and his group, and IBW. They came down here for some training, and Mike Franklin was our instructor, and it was on electrician certification. And the reason why we did this is we want to make sure that the work product we're getting supports a legal action. We don't go out on these referrals, so they're out making the discovery and putting the reports together, sending it to us, and then we write the citations. But that meeting went extremely well, where we have we have a real agreement on what they need to do out in the field and what's going to happen with their referral. So I want to thank the IBEW and also the Western Electrical Contractors Association that participated in that, because I think it's really a very strong partnership, and with staffing restrictions in the future, it could be something we need to do more of. We're in the process of completing audits of offices. I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but one of the things we're looking at is when we identify a licensed contractor that's done a very egregious act and they're likely to reoffend, so that that's a justification for filing an accusation, we want to make sure we got disclosure on our website. When that decision is made, we got to get disclosure, and so that's something I really want to focus on. When is that happening? Because the worst thing, I think, is when a consumer go to our website, find there's no pending action, when we know internally that we want to revoke that license. On page 10, just to highlight there, is we're continuing the mandatory settlement conferences. They're having success. We're able to resolve, we talked about the electrician certification citations. I'm not aware of any that have gone to hearing yet, so we're able to resolve those at minimal expense to the board. And you'll see the total savings to the public is close to $1 million year to date. On page 11, what I wanted to talk about just two meetings that have happened recently. One meeting was a week ago Monday. I thank our chair, Bob Lamb, for attending that meeting. It was at the Orange County DA's office. And what we did at that meeting, I'll say there was 80 to 90 people in attendance, and the speakers included Tony Rakakis, Orange County DA, Julie Sue, who's a labor commissioner, Simon Ransomager, chief of enforcement for the Employment Development Department, and then I was able to kind of be the last person on the panel, I suppose, right, Bob?
No,
but,
you were the lead.
Well, I don't know.
You were the main target.
I was the main target, yes, that's what it felt like. But I thought it went really well because we were able to share information. And you really, what I left there with is a belief or a knowledge that the Orange County DA's office wants to be our partner in this fight. They want to have investigators out there. They want to criminally prosecute these violators. And if industry can bring to us offenders that have made a lot of money doing this, they want to go after them for unfair business practices. Yesterday, there was a similar meeting in the California State Senate. It was the Select Committee on Small Business and the Underground Economy. The chair is Senator Mark DeSaulnier, and the other senators in attendance were Mimi Walters from Orange County and Bob Dutton, the Republican leader. A very interesting meeting. I had the opportunity to explain to them the impacts the underground economy is having on construction businesses. I told them that our main focus with underground economy is whether somebody's licensed, do they have workers' comp, and if so, are they reporting their true premiums, and then the tax avoidance. Not a lot we can do with tax avoidance, but we can't suspend the license. We have strong tools for unlicensed practice, and we've got new tools coming into play next year for workers' comp. I'll just mention some of the other speakers included Cesar Diaz from the State Buildings Construction Trades, Joseph Cruz, California State Council of Laborers, and Caitlin Vega from the California Labor Federation. The meeting went on for almost 4 hours. What I took from that meeting, though, is we got to be more careful with our sweeps. The California Chamber of Commerce was at that meeting. They expressed some concern that we're going on and doing sweeps without doing sufficient targeting, that we're finding law-abiding contractors, we're disrupting their business, and then by doing that, we're not using our resources as effectively as we can. There's a real belief that we need to have more of a centralized complaint receive complaints by one agency instead of everybody getting the complaints. Perhaps EDD can share more information. And and we also talked about workers' comp and how there might be ways to either have disclosure of policies or have more of a more effective reporting requirement based on the employer having to tell the insurance company when they've hired someone. So I know there's some people who were here at that meeting. I'm not sure where it's all going to go. They may have subsequent hearings, but at least I think they understand that they need to keep a focus on the underground economy and the impact it has on the state budget. And if we could turn over to page 13. We've conducted a number of heating and air conditioning stings, mainly working to gain compliance for the Title 24 requirements and permit requirements. We've done 3 sets of stings now in 16 cities. We've invited over 100 contractors that have been identified as now obtaining permits to these stings. And what we've done, though, prior to the stings, we've educated. We've sent them warning letters. Many times we've called them up, told them, you're doing work, you need to get a permit. And what we've been able to achieve through all this is about a 50% increase in compliance. So I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but that's where it's at. And we're hoping to do one last sting in January and bring out contractors that are violating workers' comp laws so that we can videotape the sting and have arrests made and then publicize it and also hopefully do a press conference. So appreciate Rick's work in helping us get that set up. The Economic Employment Enforcement Coalition has been retitled, it's on page 13, as a joint labor enforcement task force. Steve Sands and I have attended a lot of meetings regarding this, and we're trying to see how we fit in to make it more effective. You know, like we talked earlier, perhaps the targeting needs to be a lot more specific and not just do a general sweep of an area.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm going back to the sting that you're going to organize for workers' comp violation. What level of construction or in terms of dollars is that going to take place at? Is it, small potato like we've been doing with some of these, backyard landscaping kinds of things, or is it a little bit higher level?
It's a little bit higher because the targets that we've been using, we've been getting some of those through EDD. And now they haven't released this data, but what we've done in establishing our targets is we've gone to the yellow pages. And the first argument is that if you have a full page ad or a half page ad, you're paying a lot of money for that ad, so you must be doing quite a bit of work. Mm-hmm. We're also talking to our industry friends and asking them, who are your competitors that you believe aren't getting permits? And ideally, we're going to be using EDD statistics where if they are a reporting employer, then we know how many employees they have. They've been somewhat helpful with this. But the problem there is, I had an opportunity to sit in with a meeting with EDD, and it was staggering as to the number of HVAC contractors that don't claim to have any employees or under reporting. But to answer your question, we are trying to be very selective with this and find contractors that are doing a lot of work. And when we call them up to obtain the bid, we're asking them for a reference sheet. That's one of the ways we're able to support the violations. We're telling them, we've had problems with contractors in the past. Can you give us a list of other projects that you've done? And they're more than willing to do that. And then once we have that, we can verify that you didn't get a permit for it, then we have our cause for action. So, we don't want to go after the small contractors for this. We want to go after the larger ones. We really want to change the culture in the industry.
So larger commercial or is it?
Well, no, it's the larger residential contractors. It's those that are out in the marketplace that are advertising to do heating and air conditioning change-outs. Oh, okay. That's what it's got to be. We're not asking for a tune-up. I mean, we're asking to have our system completely replaced. Because then that way, when they come out, they have to have a permit, and they need to get the HERS rater to test the system and wrap the system, typically. So no, we're going after those that are out in that marketplace doing the complete change-outs.
Thank you.
Okay. And on page 14, just an overview of where we're at with our complaint handling. We're within the board objectives for all of our complaint handling. We're still underneath our cap for how many complaints we can effectively handle at any one time. So we're pleased about that. We are doing some shifting of caseloads throughout the state. Let's have Doug Galbraith talk about the training.
Okay. Doug Galbraith, would you like to come forward and give us a brief update on the training?
I don't know if there's any question about that. Do you want to ask for questions after he finishes?
That's fine.
Our training is focused on
the button. Push the button.
You were supposed to take care of me. Our investigations have taken place in SWIFT units and the investigative centers, but now we're including intake and mediation so that their training will be consistent, where when cases are passed from intake into the investigative centers, that it's efficient, and that the amount of work done will be a continuum instead of stopping and starting again. Most of our information comes from interviews, and this module that we're doing in this quarter is interview techniques, which it's easy to ask a question, but it's a lot more than that. And I teach with Mike Franklin, and we do an extensive workshop where they need to identify the elements of the crimes that they're looking at so that they can ask the right question. Once they ask the right questions and they've identified the elements correctly, they'll be able to go into Module 3, which is report writing and court testimony. So there's some rhyme and reason to our teaching. We started with the basics, now we're in interview techniques, and then we're going to go into report writing. But our goal is to, for the investigator to gain the confidence and the skills to know what they're looking at, know what to ask, know what evidence and testimonies and admissions and confessions to get in order for us to be successful in the investigative arena. So that's where we're at with that. Mike, do you have anything to add? I think what's important is, along with our training, the practical exercises causes them to look at a case file and extract that information that they need so that they can form strategies on how to do their case. We just don't want them to go out without a roadmap. We want them to have a strategy so that they can hit their target. They know what they're looking for when they start their investigation. It's not a search and rescue mission. It's more like a surgical strike. So they know what they're looking for, they ask the right questions, they put that in the report, and we're good to go. So I think it's very realistic. It's based on good, sound investigative techniques. Investigators usually get their experience from on-the-job training. And a lot of times they pick up habits that really don't make them good managers of their time, and also to plan and conduct an efficient and effective interview. So that's, any questions on that? We're also always having the use of our identification and a professional demeanor class. It's ongoing. So we want our people to not only be good investigators, but also to project that image when they're out there with the public or the contractors or wherever their investigation leads them. Okay?
I have a question in regards to the training itself. How's it being received by the people that are in the training courses?
Well, we critique every class, and it's very important to us, and we tell them that we want their honest comments, and I'm sure there's people that can attest to this. The evaluations have been extremely high. They say it's very job-related. You know, that's a little intimidating in front of your peers to perform, and they voiced that to Mike and I, but we weren't having any part of it. I mean, they had to perform in front of their peers to hone their skills, and I think after they went through it, they understood that in order to improve, there's a little bit of risk. And so the evaluations and the support and respect that Mike and I have received has exceeded any expectation I ever had. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
If I just, on page 19, just to conclude the enforcement update, I wanted to share with you a meeting that I had after the meeting Monday with the Orange County DA. That afternoon, I had the opportunity to meet with the San Diego District Attorney's Office. And what they wanted to talk about is how we can look at our consumer complaints where we have a problem contractor. Their argument is if you have a contractor that's violating laws and harming consumers, they're probably underreporting their workers' compensation insurance premium. And what they want to do is start prosecuting those cases. So there'll be cases that where we've got a search warrant for diversion of funds, or we're looking to file an accusation to revoke the license. We'll be able to work with the DA in getting a criminal case filed. And they want our top 3 cases out of that office right now. And I think that could be something we can do more of, along with AB 878, which will give us the ability to take an administrative action for premium fraud. Because what we're looking to do is to partner up with DAs throughout the state, have them understand that if we have a bad contractor, we need you to dedicate resources to criminally prosecute them. We want you to look at the consumer harm, the elder abuse, the workers' comp violations. But if it's something not that serious and it's a workers' comp violation that's on your desk, we can help you administratively to resolve that. So I believe it's going to be a true partnership. And these DAs that I've dealt with, they're very receptive of it. They want to work with us. And they're even willing to go so far as to dedicate staff that will be available on certain days out of the month to go out and run leads when we have a lead where we have an employer, licensed or not, that has employees on site.
Statewide? No.
Yes, I served as an instructor with the Department of Insurance and the California District Attorneys Association to provide training to mainly private insurance companies on premium fraud and how it impacts the construction industry, but also how we can share information, how to identify it, and how to prosecute it. And as you'll see on page 20, we trained over 300 deputy DAs and private and special investigations unit for insurance companies. It was very well received, and I'm looking for that, for their help, and I think they want to work with us to ensure that we're more effective in 2012 in dealing with the underground economy, as specifically it relates to failure to pay workers' compensation insurance premiums. Are there any questions about the update? Okay, thank you.
Next item is the report on consumer satisfaction survey. Steve, were you going to cover this?
Yes, I was.
You were. I mean, it's easy duty. Come on.
Well, as you may remember, Heidi's been working on automating our consumer satisfaction survey. We used to have like a year and a half, 2.5 year lag from when a complaint was open to when we sent out the survey, and then we think, Heidi thinks, it skewed our results. So what she did is she developed this electronic survey system where we get it out like immediately. We don't have to wait a year, year and a half, 2 years. And so our responses are much more timely. And as you can see, the consumer satisfaction survey results have gone up fairly significantly in all areas, and we've been kicking around why. We want to wait and get a full year's worth, and then Heidi can do her data mining to see if the response, the people that are responding, if that's changed. But when you think about it, you know, if you get this more timely, I would just guess that if you're going to get a higher satisfaction rating than if you're waiting 2 years before you get a survey in the mail. I would just guess that I'd be more likely to respond if I wasn't happy with the service I got. That's just a guess on my part. Heidi, do you remember some of the other things that we discussed that might be?
I'm wondering if, David, some of the training and things you've been implementing has had an effect on, like, people saying I was treated.
Please get you to go to the microphone. Thank you so much.
I was saying maybe some of the training that David's been implementing with the enforcement staff, that we might be seeing the results of that. Because if you look at even a question about, question 4, I was treated courteously by CSLB's representative, even that number has gone up. So I really can't give you a final answer on this. It's good to have good news and to see numbers go up. These numbers have been very stable for, as you see, that over the years they fluctuate a little bit. They don't usually jump up like this. So all I can say is whatever, David, you're doing, it must be, it's showing an effect if that seems to be reflected in our consumers' perceptions. And as Steve said, when we get a full year's data, we'll also we do some other analyses where we'll be able to see of the people who responded, how many of them had a positive outcome for their case versus negative. So that might explain if there's a more positive bias, if more of the people who had positive outcomes have responded this year due to the timeliness. So that could have an effect. Other than that, I really don't know, because in 2010, we also were more timely, and you can see the numbers are higher than, in 2011, the data is higher than 2010. 2010, we did get the survey out in a short amount of time. So unless David has something to add.
Well, if I might, I want to remind the board that I think it was our last board meeting. There was a request made that we provide this data to the board, I think on a quarterly basis. So even though it's not fully analyzed, we will give you quarterly updates. And if you think back to some of the things David's done, requiring his investigators to visit the site within a certain number of days, contacting the complainant within a certain number of days, and holding the staff to that. We have implemented a lot of policies and procedures which may in fact be reflected in the fact that we're much more timely. If you look at the the aged cases gone down considerably over the years, as are the number of open cases. We're closing more of them. The number of complaints haven't gone down, but I think it's increased training, increased oversight, better supervision, and better management in the enforcement division that we're seeing. Hopefully, that's why we're seeing some of these results. Dave, anything you want to add?
I would just add that 2 years ago, we were receiving at least one letter of complaint a week, and now it's rare. It's probably 4 or 5 a year. So I do think the training's had a real impact. Staff staying on top of their caseload, but also having more confidence in how to handle their complaints is working.
Very good. All right. Then that concludes our enforcement committee report.
Okay, very good. Since we did go out of order a little bit in order to accommodate one of our board members who had to leave, we're going to go back to the exam development presentation with Heidi Linson-Hale.
And Heidi, you'll be showing something up here, so we'll have to.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a presentation on our examination development program. And we'll start today with, this is our mission and vision for the testing division. And we started in 2008. Our testing division had undergone several major changes. We had new software, our custom software score that was developed in-house by our IT division. And we had, that prompted us to have new procedures, and we also had some newly hired staff. So we thought it was important that we develop our own mission and vision statement to make sure we're all on the same page going forward. So this is our mission in the testing division. We effectively identify contractors who are qualified for licensure through the use of valid examinations, state-of-the-art technology, and fair testing policies and procedures. And our vision is to be a role model for the licensing examination industry. From that, we developed a logo for our unit, and this logo incorporates the core principles that we embody in the testing division, and those are validity, reliability, integrity, and security. And those principles really define everything that we do in the testing division. We ensure that our examinations are a valid measure of what contractors need to know to practice safely and competently. We chose this ruler image to represent reliable measurement. In the testing world, a test needs to be reliable, and what it means is if you take the test multiple times, you should get close to the same score. Just like if you take a ruler and measure something 2 times, you should get the same result. So that's what reliability means applied to testing. And we also chose integrity and security because those principles guide us when we need to make daily decisions about how to handle applicants and how to handle test administration issues and other test development issues that don't fall under guidelines, where we just have to determine what's the right thing to do. And so we rely on what's the best thing to protect examination security, and what do we do to maintain the integrity of our examination program, because that's the most important thing. So there are regulations, standards, and guidelines that we're required to follow for our testing program. B&P Code 139 requires CSLB to submit a report every year indicating the status of our occupational analysis and examination development. B&P Code 7065 and 7068 mandate that we have a written examination, and it also specifies what knowledge must be covered. And the other codes specify we have to have periodic review and revision of the examinations. And there are also principles and standards developed by various test psychological associations Principles for validation use of personnel selection procedures applies to us, and standards for educational and psychological testing. Okay, so what I'm going to go over with you now is basically, you've probably heard, how a bill becomes a law. This is how does a test question get to a test, and what's the life cycle of a test question.
Can we see if John O'Rourke knows the answer to that?
So here's the sample test question. When adding a major electrical load to an existing home, which of the following tasks is required by the local building department? Perform load calculation of amps and volts, verify the breaker space, replace the main and subpanels, and consult the California Electrical Code. So this is what our test questions look like in their final form. This is, I'm using for an example, the general contractor exam, the B exam. And so we're going to talk about how has this test question got to the state that it's in now. So we're going to trace its transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly. So it starts as a caterpillar, ends up as a butterfly. Okay, so the process of writing a test question has several steps, and the steps are repeated what we call the examination development cycle. So this diagram illustrates the steps involved in order to end up with our test question. So all of the steps involve the the participation of licensed licensed contractors in whatever trade that we're working on, and they serve as subject matter experts. So I'm going to give you an overview of each of these steps. First step is called occupational analysis. You've heard me report. Here's the occupational analysis that we're working on, and so now you're going to get a better understanding of what that means. During the occupational analysis, we develop a description of current trade practice. The second step is the development of an examination plan, and this is a document describing the content areas or domains of the test and how much weight should be given to each area. Then we have item writing. That's a step where we actually write first drafts of the test questions. And item writing is followed by item review, where the items are reviewed by a group of subject matter experts and revised. And after the items are written and reviewed, then we determine a passing score for the examination. And following that, we administer the examination, or we construct the examination, then we administer the examination. Then we perform what's called item analysis, where we evaluate each of the test items and determine how well they're performing. And then we start the process all over again. This is a 5-year cycle. The BMP Code 139 says that we need to do this every 5 years. That's also the standard guidelines for testing in general. So we do it we actually get a little leeway, 5 to 7 years. Our goal is 5 years, and so we'll talk about that. So we're going to talk first about the occupational analysis. And here's the steps that we go through. In order to develop a legally defensible licensing examination, the examination needs to be job-related. And we can't just say, oh yeah, it's job-related. And we can't just ask board members to say, what do you guys think? Do you guys think it's job-related? We can't ask board members to write test questions. We have to go through this process. So the first step is the occupational analysis, and that begins with interviews with subject matter experts. So the first step, we send out a letter saying we're going to start working on the general contractor exam. Are you interested in participating? Are you interested in being interviewed or come to a workshop? And so we send out the letter. We get interest back from contractors, and then we start interviews. We do 9 to 12 interviews across the state in order to develop a very specific description of what licensees actually do in the course of their work. And this description takes the form of task and knowledge statements. So our goal is to have a list of task statements that describe the steps needed to perform the occupation safely and competently, and then the knowledge statements are a description of the knowledge that you need to perform those tasks. And following those interviews, we have a workshop here in Sacramento. We invite 6 to 8 or 9, 10 subject matter experts to review and refine the task and knowledge statements until they're accurate and complete. And they also group the task and knowledge statements into content areas or domains. For example, estimating and planning would be one domain. Then the final statements are compiled into an occupational analysis survey. And you heard me talk about the surveys earlier. And that survey is sent out to a large sample of licensees. If the trade has 2,000 or less licensees, we send it to everybody. And as I said, we either mail it or email, whatever. If we have email, we email it. If we don't, we mail it to the person. And if it's a trade that has thousands and thousands of licensees, like electrical or the B, then we select a sample of 2,000. So the contractors in this survey are asked to rate how frequently they perform each task and how important they believe the task is, and they also rate the importance of the knowledge statement. And then the final step in the occupational analysis is a workshop in which subject matter experts review the survey results. The frequency importance ratings for each task are compiled by content areas, and a weight for each domain is determined. And the subject matter experts also link each task with its associated knowledge to document that they go together. And they also further break down the domains into subdomains. So to make this process a little more concrete, let's go back to our sample test question. So here's our test question again. And now you can see this is the task and knowledge statements that were written prior to the sample question. And so this information is used by the item writers to develop ideas for questions. So we have the contractors come in, we say, here's a task that we need a question on. Upgrade electrical panel is required by new load. And here's the knowledge of electrical panel requirements, and that's how they got the idea for that test question. And final result of the occupational analysis is something called an examination plan. Here's the actual examination plan for the general contractor exam right now. The weights, you can see there's 5 domains there. Planning and estimating is a content domain. Framing and structural components is another domain. Core trades, finished trades, and safety. Most of our examination plans take a similar form. Most of them start with planning and estimating and end with safety. Over the years, we've just found that the safety and planning and estimating apply to every single trade. The other parts are trade specific. So then we have the weights for each domain were derived directly from the frequency and importance ratings that we got in the survey. So you can see that planning and estimating is 25% of the exam. Framing and structural components is another 25%. So those weights mean how many questions on the exam. Most of our exams are 100 questions. The A, the general engineering, and the B, the general contractor, are 115 questions. So it would be 25% of 115. So now we're going to look at one of the domains broken down into sub-areas. So we're taking that one domain, core trades. We also break it down into what we call sample groups. So under core trades, because that's kind of general, we have several sample groups. One would be plumbing, one would be electrical, one would be HVAC, and one would be concrete. And we can see we have percentages by each of those. So that tells us that what percent, so 4% of the questions in the core trades domain will have to do with plumbing. So this way we make sure, because our exams are computer generated, we make sure that we cover plumbing, electrical, HVAC, and concrete. If we just said take 25% randomly, we may get 20 questions on plumbing, and we don't want that. So we derive the weights empirically, and then we can justify the percentages because they're based on the data from the survey. So once our exam plan is completed, then we're ready to begin item writing. That's our next step. And this takes place in a workshop with 6 to 8 subject matter experts. And the facilitator gives a presentation on guidelines for writing test questions, and then the contractors write questions individually on computers. I'll show you a picture. Here's a picture of a workshop that took place a couple weeks ago. You can see we have special tables with our computers built in that are very handy for doing item writing. We have the computers come up. If we're doing item review, we put the computers down out of the way, and then we project the items up on the screen there. And and that's also our score software. You can kind of see the one person closest is he's using a custom application to write the test question. So the item writers review the exam plan. I don't know if you can see, but the guy in the brown shirt there, he's looking at his exam plan right there. So we say, here's the exam plan, look for an idea, read the task and knowledge, and determine what question you want to write about. And so They're required to indicate the task and knowledge that they write for each question. That way we don't get questions that are extraneous to what they're supposed to cover on the examination. I'm sure you've all taken exams in the past. You said, what does this question have to do with anything that this test is about? So this is to make sure that that doesn't happen. Every test question must be linked to the examination plan. And that ensures that they're all job-related because they go back to the original occupational analysis and the ratings that contractors said these things are important and these things are done frequently or both. So back to our sample question. Hopefully. Back to our sample question. This is what our question looked like when a contractor wrote it. When adding an electrical load to an existing home, what is required by the local building department? Do load calculations of amps and volts, verify the breaker space, replace the main subpanels, consult the National Electrical Code. So in the item review workshop, our goal is to have a different group of subject matter experts review and refine the previously written questions. Some people are sensitive about someone critiquing their items, so sometimes we don't, a lot of times we don't invite the same people to the review as we invited to the item writing, but some people don't mind, so we have both. So during the review, these changes were made to the question. The subject matter experts determined that we needed to say adding a major electrical load to make sure that the question would work properly. We also decided we should say perform load calculations instead of do, because it's just more a formal language, which we try to use in our examinations. We also changed National Electrical Code, which a lot of contractors still refer to California Electrical Code, because that's what California is using at this time. And we make style changes. It used to say what is required, and we changed that to which of the following tasks, because that's a standard format that we use for all of our examinations. Let's move.
Battery's going dead.
Is the battery going dead? Hope not. Rick, maybe you can push the...
A couple double A's, please.
Oh, there it went. Did you do it? You didn't do it. Okay. Okay, next step is, once the questions are written and reviewed, the next step is determine the passing score for the updated examination. So remember, this is a 5-year cycle. So this is what we go through every 5 years. The passing score would stay the same for 5 years. Then we would start this process, and then we would update. We'll update the passing score for each examination. So the passing score workshop involves 10 to 12 subject matter experts. We try to get a larger group. They're carefully selected to represent different areas of trade practice, different parts of the state. And extensive training is conducted during the passing score workshop. The first step is to develop a profile of a minimally acceptable or a minimally competent contractor. Okay, so this exercise is designed to help the participants conceptualize the level of knowledge and skill of a contractor who should pass the examination. So here they're coming to set the standard for the examination, and so we want them to first of all visualize who is this applicant. Remember, they need 4 years journey level experience. They may not be someone with 20 years or 30 years of experience, as are a lot of our subject matter experts. So we want them to visualize the level of a minimally competent contractor. Now, some people take exception and say, what do you mean minimally competent? We want them extremely competent, but we really just need the people to be competent enough to practice safely, and that's what the goal is for licensure. We're not trying to license someone who's going to be this superstar. What we do, we're licensing someone who can practice, understands all the safety components and the laws that they need to follow, and the basic codes that they need. So we have to kind of calibrate our raters so that they know what level we're looking for when we're determining a passing score for an examination. So we conduct extensive training session, and we also ask them to, we actually do ask them to make a definition of, here's what a superstar would do, here's what the minimally qualified would do, here's what unqualified contractor would do, so that they can sort of get the idea in their head of that middle level of what we're looking for. The method used to determine the passing score is called the Engoff method, and that's just that Engoff is named after the person who developed it. It's the most widely used and researched passing score method for licensure. So after developing the profile of the minimally competent contractor, the participants are asked to answer the test questions themselves. So they go through as if they were taking a test. They try to answer the question. Then they are told whether they got the question correct or not. And this gives them an indication of how difficult each question is. So they're asked to identify if they got the question correct or not, and to use that profile of the minimally competent contractor, as well as their own assessment of how difficult they think the question is, to make a rating on each question. And the rater calibration, that refers to the process of getting all the raters on the same page. So the raters are asked to make a rating of how many minimally competent contractors would get this question correct. Not how many should get it correct, but how many would. And each rater must announce his or her rating, and those who give the lowest and highest ratings are asked to justify those positions. And they basically have a discussion, and someone might say, well, I think 80% of the people will get it correct because I think it's pretty basic. And then another contractor will say, no, I think this is really hard. I didn't get this one right myself. I think only 50% would get it correct. And so they have a discussion back and forth, and they are free to change their ratings after the discussion if something that another contractor said convinced them. But there's no pressure to change their ratings. The idea is not to come to consensus, but just to solidify their rating in their mind that that's what they believe is correct. And the contractors, as we said, they're often working in various different niches, if I can say that word, different areas of the profession. So they might say, well, I do more electrical work, and that's electrical questions, so I think it's really easy. Another guy say, well, I do more plumbing, and I don't think that's easy. So they're representing all the other thousands of contractors who are in that same content, who do that same type of work. So we don't expect all their ratings to be the same for all questions. So it's just for them to listen to other people's perspectives and change their ratings if they want to. In my experience, most of them don't change their ratings very much. Here is a set of ratings, and this actually was the actual ratings for that question. And you can see they're pretty close, but they're not identical. They range from 55 up to 70. So those are the actual ratings of how many contractors who are minimally qualified would get that question correct, the electrical question. So to determine the passing score, we first take the average of all raters for each question. And for our sample question, this turned out to be 62. Which meant that the best estimate of how many competent contractors would get this question correct was 62. We then select 3 times the number of questions on an examination from our item pool in proportion to the exam plan. So remember, we had 25% of the questions on planning and estimating, so we triple that and select 75 questions from our item pool, and we look at the ratings for all those questions. We get the average. And then we do some other statistical evaluations, determine a confidence interval that to help us pick a passing score. If we pick a passing score that's further from the average of all the items, then we're less confident. If we pick it closer to what the average is, we're more confident that that's the actual correct passing score that we should use. We look at the previous passing score, what was it for the last 5 years, to see if it's how different it is. And so we evaluate all this information, and we basically make a judgment call. I talked to the testing specialist to see if anything unusual happened in the workshop. Was there a lot of dissension among the contractors, or were they all basically in agreement? Was there one contractor who was whose ratings was significantly different from all the others? We do an analysis of that. So based on this, we come together and come up with a final cut score. And although this may sound not as scientific as you might expect, this is the most defensible way to determine a passing score for licensure. It is not defensible to say, well, our law says it should be 70 for everything. So after the passing score is determined, the next step is to construct the examination. And we're scheduling right now around 48 to 50,000 exams a year. We construct more than one version of each examination. So we'll get back, how's our sample question, how does it get selected for an examination version? Well, we have our custom computer system score. It selects test questions by sample group. That's why it's important to have those domains broken down into smaller groups. We develop 1 to 3 test versions. So for the B exam, there's not just one test, there's actually 3 different versions of the test with some overlap of questions and some unique questions. At any one time, we have 70 versions across all of our trades. So depending on how many applicants are taking the test, we either have 1 version, 2 versions, or 3 versions of a test. And this, you can see this is a picture actually of our score application, and it shows us how each of the examination versions that is online right now and how many people have taken it. I don't know if you can see, but over on the right it tells us the numbers, how many people have taken it. And when 100 people have taken an examination version, it turns red, and you can see some red ones up there. And that means it's time to compute item statistics and make new versions. Except for the law and the B, they turn red like after a day, so we wait a little longer on those. So, but most of our exams, when they hit 100 people taking it, that's when we make a new version. For the law and the B, we do it every other month. And the B, there's red, that was from September, so that's like 3 months. That was just a couple days ago. So 646 times 3, so 1,800 people have taken the B in a 3-month period. So we do those every other month. The examination versions are sent out electronically to our 8 testing centers that are located in Sacramento, Oakland, Fresno, San Jose, Oxnard, Norwalk, San Bernardino, and San Diego. And the testing centers are open 5 days a week. I don't know how I'm hitting it perfectly or not. There we go. I just talked about that. It's administration. And the next step is item analysis. So how do we know if a test question is good? We have some statistics that we look at. A good test question, it's kind of like Goldilocks and the 3 bears. It can't be too hard and it can't be too easy. It has to be just the right level of difficulty to discriminate between those who should pass and those who should fail. And that's the whole purpose of a licensing examination, is to discriminate amongst those candidates who have the required knowledge and those who don't. So in other words, the people who are qualified should get a question correct, and the people who are not should get it wrong. We have these 2 statistics that help us evaluate test questions. Cumulative difficulty, that's simply the percentage of applicants who got the item correct. So if 95% of the applicants got the item correct, then it's an easy item. And it's actually too easy to be on a licensing exam. If 30% of the applicants got the item correct, then it's a very hard item. So the ideal question is one that 50% of the applicants get it correct and 50% get it wrong. But how do we know if it's the right 50%? We want the ones who are qualified to get the question correct. So to answer that question, we look at the point by serial statistic, and that statistic indicates the strength of the relationship between correct responses on this item and overall scores on the test. So in other words, a high point by serial for an item indicates that applicants who are scoring highly on the test are getting the items correct. Now on the left side of the screen, you can see this is our score application, and it's called Number Cruncher, and that's a program that computes our statistics. And all we have to do, we're on one of the B versions, you click on the version, and then you click on those steps, and those were actually just done because they have a green check mark, and it says answer sheet data analysis, process the version's raw scores, view preliminary version stats, process final version, and so it computes all of our statistics for us, which is really great. Okay, so let's look back to our sample question. Here's the statistics for this sample question. These are the actual statistics. The cumulative difficulty is 63%. That means 63 is 0.63, but that means 63% of the applicants who took it got it correct. And so that's pretty good. That's close to 50. That's a good question. The other statistic is the point by serial, and you can see there's the answer. The correct answer was A, and the point by serial is 0.30, which is positive, and that means that it has a high positive relationship with those who scored well on the test. And you can see that the incorrect answers have negative point by serial, so it's a negative relationship. So it means that they have a negative relationship with overall test score. So that means the people who did lower on the test picked B, C, and D, which C was the best distractor. The people who did worse on the test picked C. So that answer foiled a lot of people. And that's one of our goals, is to have really strong distractors. Sometimes we'll see a statistic where it's just 0, where the point by serial is 0. That means that distractor didn't pull very many people, so that we need to replace that. So now I'm going to give you a little statistics about our unit. Hopefully. There we go. Okay, so about our unit in general, we have 5 testing specialists, most of whom have advanced degrees. I have one person has a PhD, the others have master's degrees. They all have special training in examination development, and each testing specialist manages 9 examinations. They conduct 2 to 3 workshops each month on different trades. They're working on 3 or 4 projects at a time. They're either working on occupational analysis or they're working on examination development. With regard to subject matter experts, we utilize a couple hundred subject matter experts every year. We pay them $150 a day to come and participate. Most of our workshops are 2 days, so they get $300, and they also get their travel expenses paid. We do all the workshops here in Sacramento for security reasons. And we also, for passing score, it's a 3-day workshop, so that's a big commitment. So we rely heavily on the subject matter experts to provide that, to make sure that all of our tests are legally defensible and job-related. I think that's it. That's it. Is there any questions? Any questions?
Our testing unit is the largest testing unit in the state. It's larger than the departments. I think you can see what a technical process it is with all the federal and state laws that Heidi and her staff have to follow. We actually have a subject matter expert on the board. I wonder if Paul would like to explain from his perspective as a subject matter expert what it was like and what you got out of it.
So it was a unique opportunity because as a board member, we're not allowed to be subject matter experts. I was a subject matter expert before I became a board member. And I was on in the group that was doing the C-51 exam, which is for steel contractors. And they put about 8 to 10 of us in a room. And Ken Boyd, who's fantastic, Heidi, I thought, is he still with us? Yes, he is. great guy. Anyway, he's the one that coordinated and ran. It's like corralling sheep. I think that, everybody's kind of just looking for him to tell us what to do, and we'll do it. And we sat around the room, and we all brought with us all our trade paraphernalia that we need to know what we do for a living. And it really followed that exact circle that Heidi was going through. And it was a really good experience to feel like you were contributing as a subject matter expert to the test that we were putting together. There was definitely a tendency when taking it to corral everybody, which I thought was interesting, because there was a tendency in these rooms to want to pull the ladder up behind you, where all of a sudden the questions would start getting more and more difficult as the day went on, until you realized nobody could answer the questions in the room, So Ken would be, all right, slow down, there's a certain ratio of people that can get the questions right, and it kept going back to the minimum. Remember, this is a minimum standard. This isn't supposed to be the best general contractor you ever met or the best steel guy you ever met. This is supposed to be somebody that's a minimum standard to allow somebody to play in your reindeer games. And it was a great experience. Every board member should be able to do it that is in a trade, because I thought it was a wonderful experience to know what Heidi and her crew go through to put together these tests. It's a wonderful system. I mean, I couldn't compliment it enough.
If I might, to piggyback on what Paul mentioned, when I was involved in exam development with architects, I'm sure you found it in your group, but like every question you hear, but every applicant should know every question. So you have to get past that whole...
Right. It was all the traps we'd get in as setting it up.
Okay, we ready to move on? Any other questions? Hearing no other questions, we'll move on to the Executive Committee report. The committee met in Sacramento and was provided updates on personnel, business services, IT, and the budget. Concern by committee members and members of the public was raised due to the fact that hires from outside of DCA could not be considered without an approved exemption by the agency secretary. Registrar Sands provided an update on the strategic plan objectives for fiscal year 11-12 and briefed the committee on the upcoming fiscal year 12-13 strategic plan. And I'd like a motion to approve the committee's report.
So moved.
Is there a second? The motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the motion carries. We're going to move on now to, before we move on here, I'd like to, on agenda item I1, on G, on section G, you'll notice that the last sentence seems to be cut off in your board packet, and I actually have the secret message here. That sentence was supposed to have read, Mr. Sands advised the committee that the upcoming strategic planning process will be similar to our previous process and welcome any suggestions from the board. So just so you know, we're still in charge of this deal here, and your chairman sorted it out with Cindy Christensen's help. So, okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the Administrative Information Technology update, and Cindy Christensen will provide the report. Cindy?
Thank you and good afternoon. You'll see on page 1 and 2 the statistics, that's a statistical summary of all the statistics from licensing and enforcement. And as Louise pointed out earlier, you will see that the applications received and the original licenses issued have dropped. And Jonathan is tracking that with cashiering to see if a lot of that is due to the fee increase and that people that had their application returned because they sent an insufficient fee in perhaps just haven't returned those to us. So we are keeping track of that. The licenses renewed are pretty consistent. The HIS registrations have gone up a little bit. And as far as our active licensee population, that is pretty much consistent over the past couple of years. And again, the HIS registration has gone up a little bit. Our complaints over the past 3 years have pretty much stayed the same as last year, but they have gone down from 08-09. And our vacancies are way up. We now have 80 vacancies. So I'll move on to the administrative program update. We have had some exams that we've been offering, but most importantly, we are trying to fill the 80 vacancies that we have. We did have the freeze in place for a while where we couldn't hire anybody outside of DCA unless we had an exemption approved. Once that lifted, it created a new bottleneck in our personnel office at the Department of Consumer Affairs. And I wanted to thank all the industry, labor, and members of the public that were concerned over the fact that we couldn't fill those vacancies due to the freeze, and any efforts that you did to get that taken care of was very helpful to us. So it's just a matter now of just getting the paperwork through, and hopefully we'll get some good hires through. But as David mentioned earlier, and I believe Karen, there are individuals that are being laid off from the Department of Corrections, Department of Justice as the biggest departments, and we are trying to interview those people because last thing we want to see are those individuals laid off. Business services update, really nothing much to report on that. And I guess unless there's any questions on the administrator report, I'll turn it over to Amy to give the IT report.
Looking at page 6, the IT staffing challenges, we are working on 2 recruitments right now for the staff and the system software specialist 2. We anticipate the cutoff, I believe, is December 12th to get the final applications into us. So after we get the final apps, we will begin our interviews. The limited liability company program modifications, as Karen indicated, they are underway. All the applications are in the development side of our system, and we are actively testing. Let's see, our website, we're happy to report that we haven't had any major issues. We have had the Better Business Bureaus of the various areas contacting myself and Rick, wanting to see if they can reestablish the services. We are not doing that. However, we are working with them in our public sales area to see what we can provide them, and maybe on a weekly basis. Breeze, working right now, we're working with the contractor in further defining the business requirements. CSLB staff, and as you know, Jason is over at DCA, pretty much living there, working with the vendor in defining these requirements. They are going to be coming out and talking to the executive staff here, the Breeze team, and talking about some of the requirements that they may consider bells and whistles. And then Cindy is also on the Change Control Board, and I believe they've had 3 meetings to date to address any issues that are out of scope of the project. And then finally, the California email system. This is the consolidation. It was an executive order mandating us to move our email system to the state email system at our data center. And we are doing so. It's been very difficult, to say the least. We originally anticipated movement of all state agencies June. That's the executive order mandated by June. CSLB is the first to go. We are the pilot department, DCA is, and I'm leading that project. We were scheduled for September, October, November, and maybe in 2 weeks. Today, we meet daily. Today, it looks like we might be postponed to January. Specifically, there are issues with performance, out-of-sequence packaging, and issues with the legal hold tool, which is called Proofpoint. And that's when folks are put on litigation hold, the current system or the tools that they're providing us with are not functioning properly. And that's the status of that. And it does change daily.
Just to clarify, when she said the entire state was supposed to be on that system by June, that wasn't June next year, that was June 6 months ago.
Okay. And that's my report. Any questions? Great. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no questions, we'll move on to agenda item I3, and we'll get a budget update from Jonathan Bowe. Jonathan?
Thank you. Starting on page 1, top, 2011-2012 CSLB budget And expenditures through the end of September, CSLB has expended or encumbered roughly $15 million, roughly 25% of its revised budget for fiscal year 11-12. Going to the chart on the bottom of page 1, CSLB through September 30th has collected a little over $16 million in revenue. As was discussed earlier, you notice that application fees and new license fees are down by almost 5% from the previous fiscal year. One of the reasons for this is we've experienced a number of return payment notices much higher than in previous years. For July through November of 2011, CSLB has processed almost 2,800 return payment notices. That's compared with 1,700 for the same period for 2010, a 64% increase. Just as also a quick aside, I would have you note that the renewal fees listed in this chart, when compared with the previous year, of course, CSLB is on a 2-year renewal cycle, and so those fees, when compared from 2 years ago, are up over 20%. Keep in mind that we are in the down year of the 2-year renewal cycle. Going to page 2, fiscal year 2011-12 CSLB budget adjustments. We are in the revised budget period. We will know our final budget roughly by middle of January. At this point, the revised budget is $59.6 million, including scheduled reimbursements, and has those 3 adjustments listed on the page. One more adjustment that has not been determined as of yet will be the reduction for the furlough savings from July through October, and we should know that around mid-January. Going to the bottom of page 2, the proposed CSLB budget change proposal requesting additional resources for the subsequent arrest unit was denied by the Department of Finance. Going to page 3, CSLB fund condition. One thing not on this fund condition is CSLB has collected $250,000 in current fiscal year as part of the PIC Red settlement, bringing the total collected on reimbursements for that to $1.25 million. The chart on the page shows by the end of fiscal year 13-14, we anticipate CSLB having a reserve of roughly 3.5 months. Finally, going to page 4, construction management education account. Top chart shows the amount expended through September, $3,200 in pro rata charges. Those pro rata charges are for services provided for awarding of the grants, processing of the checks, that sort of thing. Bottom of page 4 shows the Cmea fund condition. Includes assumed grant awards $150,000 going forward and state operation pro rata roughly $28,000 going forward. What that will do for Cmea by the end of fiscal year 13-14 will have it in the red by approximately $3,000. I would point out to the board, of course, that the Cmea grants, we are not required to award those grants. Basically, we award them on the basis of available funds. So there is no way that this would impact current licensees. All revenue collected by Cmea is on the basis of voluntary contributions by applicants and licensees. Anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item I4, review and possible recommendation regarding the board member administrative procedure manual. Cindy Christensen will cover this item for us. Cindy?
The board member administrative procedure manual was reviewed by the executive committee, and it covers such topics as rules of conduct, board meeting procedures, and travel procedures. The last version is dated January 2011, and the committee recommended full approval of it to the board, and it was sent out to each of you via electronic mail, and I didn't receive any comments back, so unless there's any comments now, if I could get a motion to approve the 2011 version for 2012.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the procedure manual. Is there any questions? On the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item I5, the update of the 2011-2012 strategic plan objectives. And our Registrar, Stephen Sands, will provide this update. Steve?
Okay, on the Executive Committee, we reviewed the status of our current objectives and our strategic plan. As I go through these, if board members have any questions or comments, please let me know. Number one, reorganizing the Enforcement Division. We've contracted with CPS, a quasi-state agency, to do a thorough review of our Enforcement Division and our classifications and enforcement. They got a late start, so now we're looking at probably second or third quarter of 2012. Number two, establishing the expanded media outreach plan. That was affected by our contracts, so Rick is, or lack thereof, so Rick is working with the Public Affairs Committee on that. Develop a plan to explore licensure for solar. They are working on that. They visited a solar farm, I think, last week. David and Karen are working on that. That probably won't be until the second quarter of 2012. The new flagship consumer education publication, they are working on it probably first or second quarter next year. The training curriculum for new hires, that is on track. That is completed. Coordinating state and local agencies, David is working on that. That is on track. 7, I put an infinity sign behind that. We'll guess the state will get to it when it gets to it. 8, develop the legislative relationship plan. That's moved back to the second or third quarter of 2012. I'm recommending that this be an item for a strategic planning session next April. Workers' comp, that bill passed, goes into effect January 1st. We will not have the policies and procedures in place for quite a while because of our resource challenges, IT staff, licensing staff, maybe second quarter 2012. That is a resource issue. The new flagship moved back to second or third quarter. 11, they have started on that, the new education video, second or third quarter 2012. MOUs, we are in the process of reviewing and updating all those MOUs. David and I are involved in a couple of task force, and we're still working with Bob Dresser and others, the Labor Workforce Agency, and updating those MOUs. The 9 peace officers, we're doing okay with if we get some of these people from DOJ, we might be on track to at least have them all identified. The 14 is dead. The subsequent arrest unit for the BCP, through the BCP process. Enforcement staff classification system is a subset of 1. We've contracted, like I said, with CPS to work on that. And the online exam scheduling tool, that's out there pretty far. We'll just have to wait and see how IT staffing and licensing goes. A couple of things I want to make sure the board members are aware of. First of all, I have a question. Did all of the board members get, number one, an electronic copy of the board packet, and did you all get a hard copy? Because Bob didn't get a hard copy. Did anyone else not get a hard copy in the mail? Mark did not get a hard copy? Okay. What I think we're experiencing is that when you have 25% fewer available staff because of vacancies and furloughs, things are slipping through the cracks. That's not an excuse. Well, I guess it is an excuse because we can't answer phones, mail can't get opened or processed as timely. Things are slower. We're already seeing licensing transactions going up 3-4 weeks. Because we don't have an executive assistant, for example, the call center's been challenged. The quality, the high quality that we like to maintain here at the board is not going to be sustainable unless we can start filling these positions. I just want you to be aware of that. As things occur, let us know. We'll try to address them. But I think that's just the new normality. We're getting back to that minimally competent stage, I'm afraid. But this is something we can talk about, at strategic planning. The strategic planning is set for Monterey in April. We talked about this at the executive committee meeting, and we asked the committee members if they would change anything in the process. The board members indicated they like the process. So I'd like to open it up to the board members. Is the process where the consultant meets with senior staff, then individually interviews the board members, then we have the day-long or day-and-a-half-long retreat, and we break out into breakout sessions? Is that the process you want to continue? Do you want to tweak it? Is there anything you want to change or add? Let me put it this way. If you think of anything, let Bob know, or let me know, or let Cindy know, and we'll talk to the consultants. Any ideas you have on improving it, just let us know, because this consultant is more than eager to do whatever we want. And I really think he's good, and and so he'll do whatever. So let us know if there's anything you want to do differently or change. Okay? If I could go on to the tentative schedule, February 7th is our next board meeting. We do have the hotel, I don't remember the name of it, but Monterey, we're working on a couple of properties. We're looking at the same hotel we had last time. And then we're looking at the same hotel that we had the June meeting with Nevada. We are planning a meeting with the Nevada board June 5th in Orange County, probably at the same hotel, following the same format as last year. So those are the board meetings set through the end of the next fiscal year. Are there any questions regarding the tentative schedule? Okay.
All right, we've come to that time you've all been waiting for. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. We stand adjourned.